bergamot, then black tea, then a whisper of fig leaf underneath. I know that formula blindfolded because I built it alone in the back workshop over 400 nights nobody ever watched. My name is Corinne Ashby. I'm 36, and for 10 years I mixed the scent that made my stepmother famous. So when Vivian stood on a stage in front of 300 guests and a wall of press cameras at our flagship launch, held up a bottle with her name pressed into the glass, and called me the girl who's been riding someone else's success without ever contributing a single drop, I didn't argue. I asked for a blind test. Right there, on stage, in front of everyone. I asked her to identify the signature scent she'd supposedly created herself, the one with her name on every bottle for 10 years. And I watched her stand there, blindfolded, unable to name a single note of it. Then I invited a retired perfumer to the stage, the man who once taught my mother everything she knew. What he said next didn't just end my stepmother's career in front of every journalist in the room. It rewrote whose name should have been on that bottle from the very beginning. The scent memory came before the words did. I was 14 the year my mother turned our kitchen into a classroom with no chairs. She'd stand behind me, tie a strip of black silk over my eyes, and set small glass vials on the counter one at a time. Don't think, she'd say. Just tell me what your body already knows. Bergamot, then clove, then something green and bruised that turned out to be crushed fig leaf. I got it wrong more than I got it right, but she never sighed, never corrected me twice the same way. She just said, again, and moved the next vial closer to my hand. My mother's name was Eloise Ashby, and she was a nose. Not a hobbyist, not a shopkeeper who dabbled, a nose. The kind of perfumer other perfumers quietly asked for help. She ran Maison Eloise out of a storefront the size of our living room, and in the back, on shelves she built herself. She kept a notebook. Leather cover, cracked at the spine, pages gone soft as cloth from handling. She wrote in a mix of English and French shorthand, Bois de Santal, Note de tête, 3 gouttes, with a date in the corner of every entry, small and precise, like she knew someone would need to check her work someday. She died 6 weeks before my 15th birthday. An aneurysm, the doctors said, the kind that gives no warning and asks no permission. I remember the last thing she taught me was not a formula. It was a rule. If you can't tell the truth about what something smells like, she said, you can't tell the truth about anything.
I didn't understand it then.
I understood the notebook, though. My father put it in my hands the week after the funeral, and I have not let go of it since. 2 years later, my father remarried. Vivian came into our house with good posture and better instincts, and within a year she'd taken over the shop lease, hired a designer, and repainted the sign. Maison Eloise became simply Vivian. She was 32 then, sharp and photogenic in a way my mother had never bothered to be, and she had one thing my mother's little shop never had, an instinct for being watched. What she did not have was a nose. Not really. She could tell you a scent was warm or expensive the way anyone can, but she couldn't build one from nothing, couldn't take raw bergamot and vetiver and turn them into a sentence that meant something. So when she needed a signature fragrance to launch the relaunched brand, something to put her name on, something to make magazines say found her calling, she came to me. I was 17. I didn't have a diploma. I had my mother's notebook and 10 years of being told again until my hands stopped shaking. I built it in the back workshop, the same room my mother used to work in, with the black silk blindfold still in the drawer where she'd left it. It took 4 months. When I brought Vivian the final formula, she smelled it once, said, "That's it. That's the one," and never asked me a single question about how I'd made it. 3 weeks later, Vivian #1 launched with her photograph on the box. That was 10 years ago. I have mixed something for that brand nearly every season since. Reformulations, seasonal editions, the anniversary edition that outsold everything else that year, and in all that time I have never once stood on a stage. Vivian stands on the stage. I stand in the workshop with the door closed, so the customers don't have to know the shopgirl smells like chemistry, not magic. Tonight is the night before the flagship launch, the biggest one yet, 300 guests, a wall of press, Vivian's name in gold on the window. I'm alone in the workshop at 11 at night, the overhead light buzzing faintly, and I have the notebook open on the bench in front of me. I found the page by accident, chasing a formula ratio I half remembered. The ink is the exact shade my mother always used, the handwriting unmistakably hers, and the date in the corner says I was 9 years old when she wrote it. It's the formula for Vivian number 1. I sit very still for a long moment, the workshop humming around me, and then I keep turning pages, because some old habit in my hands wants to know what else I never finished reading. Near the back, past the entries that stop making sense as recipes and start reading like a letter, I find the last page my mother ever wrote in that notebook. Most of it is formula, familiar shorthand, notes on dry down and fixative ratios. But underneath, in different ink, like she added it later, there's a single line I don't remember ever noticing before. If you can smell this one, you're ready. And beside it, one name, written the way she wrote names she trusted.
Laurent.
The steam iron hissed against pleated linen, and I set the note in my pocket without another look at it.
Laurent.
A name I had never heard my mother say out loud, written in the hand she used only for people she trusted. I would think about that later. The dress rehearsal started at 9, and it was 8:40. The Flagship floor smelled of fresh paint and cut lilies, underneath it the chemical sweetness of new carpet glue. Vivian stood center floor in a cream suit, headset clipped to her ear, directing 2 men who carried a gold-leafed pedestal toward the stage like it was a coffin. Not there. There. She pointed, without looking. The bottle needs the morning light, or it photographs flat. I came up beside her with a tray of sample vials.
Morning.
Where do you want me? She glanced at the tray, then at me, the way she might glance at a delivery she hadn't ordered. Downstairs. Sample counter. By the coat check. I thought I'd be near the stage tonight. For the reveal. The reveal is for the brand Corinne, not for staff. She said it lightly, already turning away, already speaking to someone else about the lighting rig. Staff. I had heard her call me a lot of things over the years, dear, sweetheart, occasionally darling in front of clients, but never, until that morning, staff. Delphine found me 20 minutes later near the elevators, a clipboard against her chest, sounding more like her mother's assistant than her mother's daughter. Here's tonight's positions. She handed me a printed sheet, my name at the bottom underground floor, samples. I'm not on the speaking list, I said. It wasn't a question. Mom's doing the toast. Then the unveiling with the press wall. Delphine wouldn't meet my eyes. It's just optics. Founder photo is her, me, the design team. It's already gone to the printer. The founder photo doesn't have me in it. Corinne. She said my name like an apology. She didn't have room to finish. I have 40 things on fire right now. I took the sheet.
Fine.
I had spent 17 years in a back room with a copper still and a notepad, and one more night down there, among strangers sniffing sample cards, wasn't going to break anything that hadn't already been broken a long time ago. By 11, Marcus Hale arrived early for his walkthrough, tall in a navy suit that didn't wrinkle no matter how he moved, the kind of man who shook your hand and looked at you while he did it. He was the largest distributor backing the launch. His signature on the contracts had paid for the marble floor under my feet. He lifted the gold-capped bottle of Vivian number 1 off its pedestal, turned it under the light, and inhaled from the cap the way people do when they actually know what they are smelling for. This is the one that built the house, he said, mostly to himself. Then, to Vivian, who had appeared at his elbow within seconds. Who holds the formula? I like to know that. For continuity. Insurance people ask too.
I do, Vivian said.
No pause at all. Every note. I could build it blindfolded. I was 6 feet away, refilling a sample tray, and I did not look up. I did not say anything. There was a version of me, 17 years younger, who might have corrected her out of pure reflex. That version was gone. A reporter with a lanyard and a paper notebook stepped in before Marcus could ask anything else. Mrs. Ashby, can you tell us what inspired the original scent? Readers love an origin story. Vivian smiled the practiced smile, the one that photographed well. Oh, it was instinct, really. A feeling. Jasmine reminded me of my honeymoon. A pause half a second too long. And something green underneath. Freshness. You know. Something green. Not vetiver. Not the name of anything. I had rebuilt that formula's base note 100 times in the back room, and there was nothing in it called freshness.
She didn't know.
10 years, 300,000 bottles sold under her name, and standing 4 feet from the bottle that made her, Vivian Ashby could not have told you what was inside it if her life depended on the answer. Marcus set the bottle back down slowly, and for a moment his eyes stayed on it rather than on her. Authenticity, he said, half to the reporter, half to no one. That's what people are paying for now. Not the bottle. The story behind it. He didn't wait for Vivian to answer. He was already moving toward the press wall, checking his watch. I finished stacking the tray and carried it downstairs, past the coat check, to my station by the door, where the light was worse and no camera would ever point. At 6, as the room filled with catering staff setting up glassware, I passed behind a half-closed office door and heard Vivian's voice, low, meant for no one but Delphine. Make sure that girl never gets near a microphone tonight. I stopped in the hallway. Water glasses clinked somewhere behind me, a caterer laughing at something. Delphine murmured a reply I couldn't catch. Why? I heard Delphine ask, quieter. She's not going to make a scene. I'm not worried about a scene, Vivian said. I'm worried about a question. I stood there a moment longer than I needed to before I kept walking. She had called me staff that morning without flinching. Now she was giving orders about a microphone I had never once asked to hold, over a question she wouldn't even name. I wondered what, exactly, she was afraid I might say into it. The address Laurent had given over the phone was 217 Rue de Mouettes, and I wrote it on the back of a sample card because I couldn't find real paper. 3 hours south, the highway narrowing into a coast road, salt starting to sit on my tongue before I even opened the window. I found the house by its garden first, lavender gone leggy, rosemary hedged wild, a fig tree dropping fruit nobody had bothered to collect. The man who opened the door was smaller than I expected, stooped, wearing a cardigan the color of weak tea. He looked at me for a long moment without saying anything. You're Eloise, he said finally. Not a question. Corinne. I called yesterday. He didn't answer right away. He took my wrist instead, turned it gently, and put his nose an inch above my pulse point. His breathing changed. I felt it more than heard it. A catch held released. Where did you get this? He said. His voice had gone rough. It's mine. I made it years ago. A version of something. I don't even know what to call it. I know what to call it. He let go of my wrist like it had gotten hot. Come inside before I say something foolish on my own doorstep. His workshop smelled of dust and dried orris root, shelves of amber bottles gone cloudy with age, labels in a handwriting I recognized without wanting to. He moved through it like a blind man who'd memorized the furniture, which, I would learn, he nearly was. His eyes had started failing years ago, and his nose had simply taken over the job of seeing. Sit, he said, and I sat. Tell me why you drove 3 hours to smell like your mother. I found your name. In her notebook. Last night. The page before the last one. I hadn't planned to say it that plainly, but there was no room in that workshop for anything else. I need to know who you were to her. He was quiet long enough that I thought he might not answer at all. Then he pulled a tin box from a drawer, set it on the table between us, and opened it like it might still bite him. Inside were letters. Real paper, brittle at the folds, and beneath them 3 glass vials, each with a strip of yellowed tape and a signature in fountain pen, E. Ashby, and a date. I was there, he said, when she built it. Not helped. Watched mostly. Argued with her about the base note for a week, because I thought she was wrong, and she wasn't. He touched one of the vials without lifting it, like touching it too hard might spend something. She used to say a fragrance had to survive an argument before she'd trust it. Built what? I said, though I already knew, the way you know a name is coming before it's said. Vivien número uno. He looked at me directly then, and for a man who could barely see, his eyes found mine with unsettling precision. Your mother's structure. Bergamot up top that shouldn't have worked with that much iris, and it worked because she was stubborn about it. I watched her write it down. I watched her seal it in a book with a green ribbon. The workshop went very quiet. Somewhere outside, a gull was arguing with another gull. Then why, I said, is Vivian's name on it? He closed the tin box. That was answer enough until he made himself give me the rest. Because I let it happen. His hand stayed flat on the lid. Your mother died, and 2 years later that woman came to see me. This was before the relaunch, and she asked what I knew about Eloise notebooks. I told her nothing, because I didn't trust her voice. She told me if I ever said otherwise in public, she'd make sure I never consulted for another house again. Slander, she called it, before I'd even opened my mouth to say a true thing. He looked down at his own hands. I was 68. I had a pension and a garden, and no fight left in me. So I said nothing. For 10 years, I have arranged Rosemary and said nothing. I didn't come here for an apology, and I told him so. I'm not asking you to make this right for me, I said. I'm asking you to come to the launch. Thursday night. That's all. To do what?
To be there.
I don't know yet what I'll need. But if I need someone in that room who knew her, I want it to be you and not a photograph. He studied me the way I imagine he once studied blotters of unfinished scent, waiting to see what a thing would become in the next 10 minutes. I'll come, he said. I'll wear the good jacket. I stood, and he walked me to the door, and I thought that was the whole visit. A confession, an apology, an old man's quiet shame finally spoken into a room instead of a garden. I had my hand on the car door when he called after me, still standing on the step, one hand braced on the frame like the house itself needed steadying him. Corinne. He waited until I turned around. There is something about that fragrance you don't know. And if I say it out loud Thursday night, it won't only be Vivian who comes apart. I asked him what he meant. He shook his head once and went back inside without answering, and I stood in his driveway a long time before I trusted myself to drive. The house was dark when I got home. I did not turn on the kitchen light. I went straight to the workshop, the small back room I still kept even though I had not needed to hide there in years, and I put the notebook on the table next to my laptop. I pulled up the trademark filing. The registration for Vivian No. 1 was public record, filed with the National Fragrance Registry. I had looked it up once before, years ago, and closed the tab without reading past the first page. This time I read all of it. Filed date, March 3rd, the year I was 19. I turned to the notebook. My mother's handwriting, small and slanted, the ink gone brown at the edges. Top corner of the page, a date. I had seen it the night before and let it slide past me because I hadn't been looking for this yet. Now I looked. The date in the notebook was 4 years earlier than the filing date. For years. I read it again, moved my finger under the numbers like I was 9 years old and sounding out a word. For years before Vivian filed this as her own, my mother had already written it down, in French shorthand, with a margin note in her looping hand. Bergamot, Calabria Sulmant. Bergamot, Calabria only. I opened the filing PDF wider on the screen and found the ingredient breakdown Vivian's lawyers had submitted. Required disclosure, top and heart notes only, the kind of thing that satisfies a registry clerk who has never smelled anything more complicated than a candle. Bergamot, yes. Iris, yes. Then nothing. I sat back. There was no base. No foundation listed at all. No vetiver, no amber, no musk anchor. Nothing to hold the top notes down once they burned off in the first 20 minutes. I read it 3 times because I did not want to be wrong about something this small and this enormous at once. You skipped the floor, I said out loud, to no one, and my own voice startled me in the empty room. You cannot register a perfume without a full accord unless you don't understand that a perfume is not the first thing you smell. It's the last thing. The top notes are the introduction. The base is the person still standing in the room an hour later. Whoever filled out this form did not know that. They copied down what was easy to see and skipped what took 9 months and a burned batch and my mother crying once, quietly, at this same table, to figure out. I knew because I was the one who had figured it out.
Twice.
Once as a child watching her work, and once 17 years later, alone in this room, trying to remember her hands. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a name I hadn't called in 2 years. Priya Ose, a lawyer who'd handled contract disputes for two other perfumers I knew. My thumb hovered over the call button. I put the phone down instead. A lawsuit would take 18 months. 12 people in a jury box who had never smelled bergamot from Calabria in their lives would decide whether Eloise Ashby existed the way I knew she existed. I did not want strangers deciding that. I wanted a room full of noses. I wanted it shown, not argued, in front of the same cameras that would carry Vivian's name across every trade paper by Friday morning. You cannot fake having smelled something. That was the whole of my plan, right there, small and hard as a stone in my pocket. I printed the filing anyway, the comparison, notebook page beside registration page, side by side, so I'd have it in my hands and not just on a screen. The printer in the corner was old, and it took its time, grinding out one page, and then, after a pause long enough to make me impatient, the second. When the second page came out, I picked it up to align the two, and that was when I saw it. The registration form required a signature at the bottom, under a line that read Authorized Applicant. I had glanced past it twice already, my eyes going straight for the ingredient list both times. Now I held the page under the desk lamp and looked, really looked. The signature was not Vivian's. I knew Vivian's signature. I'd seen it on 100 delivery slips, a stiff, showy V with a tail that curled back on itself like she'd practiced it in a mirror for years before it satisfied her. This was smaller, rounder, unhurried in a way Vivian's never was. A signature I had also seen 100 times on marketing budgets, on photo releases, and 3 weeks ago, on a birthday card that had been sitting on the counter at the shop. It was Delphine's. I set the page down on the table very carefully, the way you set something down when your hands have started to shake and you don't trust them anymore. I set the page down carefully. Then I picked up my phone and called Delphine. She answered on the second ring, already impatient. I'm in the middle of the seating chart, Corinne. Whatever it is. Come to the workshop.
Now.
Alone. Something in my voice made her go quiet for a second.
Fine.
20 minutes. She arrived in 18. I heard her heels on the concrete before I saw her. That fast, clipped rhythm she'd had since she was a girl, always half a step ahead of wherever she actually needed to be. She pushed through the door in a cream blazer, phone still in her hand, thumb moving. I have exactly 10 minutes before I have to be back upstairs, she said, not looking up. Marcus wants to walk the guest list again. I slid the registration page across the work table without a word. She glanced down, kept scrolling her phone. Then her thumb stopped. She looked at the page properly. I watched her face do the thing faces do when they're recalculating faster than they wanna, the little flatten around the mouth, the blink that comes half a second too late. Where did you get this? Public trademark filing. Anyone can request it. I kept my voice level, the way I'd keep it steady over a blotter that was about to tell me something I didn't want to smell. That's your signature, Delphine. Not your mother's. It's a formality. She said it fast, the way you say something you've rehearsed saying. Filings need an officer of the company. I'm marketing director. I sign things. You signed a fragrance origin declaration. Under your name, attesting you have knowledge of the formula's creation. I turned the page toward her, tapped the line. Do you? She didn't answer. She set her phone face down on the table, which told me more than anything she could have said next. She told me it was routine. Delphine said, quieter now. Paperwork. She said the lawyers needed a second name on file in case anything happened to her. That's all. I signed 6 things that week. I didn't read all 6 things that week. Would you have signed this one if you had? The workshop was cold the way it always was in the evenings, the extraction fans clicking on and off on their timer, and somewhere under the countertop the old refrigeration unit hummed at a pitch that used to drive Eloise up the wall. Delphine's eyes moved around the room like she was looking for something familiar to land on and not finding it. You don't get to walk in here and make me the villain, she said, and her chin came up, the old reflex. You've spent 10 years in the back room being the martyr, Corinne. Don't act like I owe you an accounting of my mother's paperwork. I'm not asking for an accounting. I kept stacking the sample vials in front of me, small glass sounds, something to do with my hands. I'm telling you what's on a public document with your name on it. What you do with that is yours. It's a formality, she said again, but slower this time, like she was testing whether it still held its shape coming out a second time. It didn't. I let the silence sit. 10 seconds. 15. She was the one who broke it. If this came out wrong, she said, if someone made it look like fraud instead of formality, that's not my mother's name on the line, is it? It's mine. There it was. The bank wouldn't come after Vivian first, I said. They'd come after whoever's signature is actually on the form. Delphine sat down on the stool across from me, hard, like her legs had made the decision before she had. Up close, I could see what 3 weeks of launch prep had done to her. The concealer worked hard over the shadows, a hangnail she'd been picking at during meetings. You don't know what the last 4 months have been like, she said. The Flagship lease alone was $600,000 a year.
She didn't have it.
She borrowed against the house, against the old inventory, against I don't even know what else. Some private lender out of Geneva, not a bank, because a bank wanted collateral she didn't have. If Thursday goes badly, if a single distributor pulls out, she doesn't just lose the launch. She loses everything, and I'm standing next to her holding paper with my name on it. That was the piece I hadn't had an hour ago, and it rearranged the whole shape of what was coming. Vivian wasn't performing confidence on that stage Thursday night. She was standing on a ledge. I'm not telling you this because I want to help you, Delphine said. I want that clear. I'm not switching sides. There aren't sides. As far as I'm concerned, there's a mess, and I'm the one it's going to land on. Then why are you telling me? She was quiet for a moment, turning her phone over on the table without picking it up. Then she reached into her blazer pocket and set something down next to my hand, a small folded card, the kind with a printed strip of numbers on it. Stage LED access code, she said, for the main display board, in case you need to show people something they can actually see. I looked at the card, then at her. Why give me this? She stood, smoothed her blazer, and for a second she looked exactly like her mother standing at a podium, except her voice, when it came, had none of Vivian's polish in it. I'm not doing this for you, she said, cold and even. I'm doing it for me, but if you're going to do this, don't do it halfway. My mother will eat you alive. I didn't answer her. I watched her walk toward the elevator, heels clicking on the concrete, and then I went back to the workshop and started making a list. Laurent, seat reserved, back row near the sound booth, easy exit if security got twitchy. The blind test strips, 3 of them, already cut and labeled on the underside, so only I would know which was which. The notebook. I put my palm flat on the safe door before I even opened it, the way you touch a stove to check if it's still hot. The safe was in the back corner of the workshop, behind the alembic stills, a combination only Gerald and I knew. I turned the dial, 14, my age when Eloise died, then 9, the year she wrote the formula, then 32, Vivian's age the year she stole it. The door clicked open. The notebook was there. Same navy cover. Same coffee ring on the corner from some morning 20 years ago I'd never asked about. I almost didn't check further. But I flipped past the first page anyway, and the paper felt wrong under my thumb. Too smooth, too new, no giving it. I flipped faster. Every page. Photocopies. Someone had recreated the cover, weighted the spine with cardboard, and slid it into the safe in place of the original. I stood there for a long moment with the fake notebook open in my hands, and the workshop was very quiet except for the hum of the ventilation fan. She'd been in here. Vivian had never once set foot in this workshop in 10 years. She called it the back, said the smell of raw musk gave her headaches. She'd been in here with a key she wasn't supposed to have, and she'd taken the one thing that couldn't be argued with. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, forwarded through the venue's front desk line. Mr. Vasseur's reservation has been cancelled per updated guest list. Please advise if he attempts entry. I called Laurent immediately. It rang 4 times before he picked up, and when he did his voice had that particular flatness of a man who'd already heard the news from someone else. Security called my hotel, he said. Very polite young man. Said there'd been a change to the guest list, and would I mind rescheduling for another time? I'll fix it. I'll call Marcus, Corinne. He said my name the way you set down something heavy. There's something I should have told you at the house. I sat down on the stool by the perfume organ, the cold from the metal seat going straight through my jeans. Tell me now. Your mother didn't finish that fragrance alone. A pause, the kind that costs a man something to get through. I helped her build the base structure. The vetiver, the amber, we worked on that together in my studio for almost 2 months. She wrote it all down in her own hand, yes. It was her signature on it, her name on every letter. But if anyone asks me, under oath, whether Eloise Ashby composed Vivian #1 entirely by herself, you'd have to say no. I would have to say no. I looked at the perfume organ in front of me, the neat rows of amber bottles I'd arranged 1,000 times, and for one dizzying second, I couldn't remember which ones held vetiver and which held oak moss. Everything I thought I knew how to say tonight had just grown a second meaning. If authorship was shared, then what was I actually proving on that stage? That Vivian stole a formula, yes, still true, still monstrous. But if I stood up there and said my mother's work, and Laurent had to correct me in front of 300 people and every trade journalist in the city, then it wouldn't be Vivian's credibility that cracked open on that stage. It would be mine. And by extension, hers. Eloise Ashby, dead 16 years, unable to defend the shape of her own name. Laurent, why are you telling me this tonight of all nights? Because you asked me to stand in front of a room and tell the truth. I won't do half of it. Not even for you. His voice softened, just barely. But I am still coming tomorrow, notebook or no notebook, guest list or no guest list. Find me a way in. I hung up and sat there a long time. Outside the workshop window, delivery vans were already unloading crates of champagne glasses for tomorrow's launch, dollies rattling over cobblestone, someone laughing too loud in the cold. I thought about calling Marcus about the guest list and stopped myself. If I told him security had cut Laurent, he'd want to know why, and I didn't have an answer that didn't lead straight back to a notebook I could no longer produce. I dialed the venue instead. A young man's voice, apologetic and unmovable. I'm sorry, ma'am. The change came through Ms. Ashby's office directly. I'd need her sign-off to reverse it. I am an Ashby. I understand, ma'am. I'll note your call. I set the phone down on the workbench and looked at the fake notebook lying open under the lamp, its cardboard spine catching the light wrong. Someone had planned this days in advance. The cover recreated, the guest list quietly edited, all of it moving while I was still choosing sample strips. The notebook was gone. My one unshakable witness had a truth that cut both ways. And I had 18 hours to decide what, exactly, I was willing to say out loud with 300 people watching and no going back. That was when my phone lit up again, this time with a name I hadn't seen on my screen in almost a decade.
Dad.
3 words, nothing else. Notebooks with me. The garage light buzzed on, that flickering half-second before it caught. Gerald was already there, sitting on an overturned crate, a metal toolbox open on his knees. You called me, I said. 3 words. What's this about, Dad? He didn't look up. His hands were moving over the toolbox tray, the top layer of sockets and wrenches, like he was deciding whether to go through with something. Then he lifted the tray out and set it on the concrete floor. Beneath it, wrapped in an old flannel shirt, was the notebook. My mother's notebook. The real one, not the copy from the safe. I didn't move toward it. My legs wouldn't let me yet. I took it the night she tried to burn it, Gerald said. 9 years ago. Vivian had the fireplace going, said the past didn't belong in a house with her name on the door. I told her I'd already thrown it out. I hadn't. I put it in the garage under the sockets and I never told anyone.
Not you.
Not her. 9 years. I said it flat, testing the weight of it. You let me think it was gone. I let everyone think a lot of things. He finally looked at me. His eyes were wet in a way I'd never seen on him, not even at the funeral. I knew, Corinne. I knew Vivian #1 was your mother's. I watched her write half of it at the kitchen table when you were small, humming while she did it. I said nothing when Vivian put her name on the bottle. I said nothing for 11 years.
Why?
Because I was afraid of losing everything a second time. His voice cracked on the word second. Your mother died, and I panicked. Vivian came in with a business plan and a bank loan, and I let her rebuild the store because I couldn't. I told myself silence was the price of keeping a roof over your head. It wasn't. It was the price of my own comfort. I sat down on the crate across from him. The concrete was cold through my jeans. Somewhere above us a pipe ticked as it cooled. Laurent told me something on the phone, I said. That he and Mom built the base note together. That it wasn't only hers. If that's true, I don't know what I'm defending tonight. Gerald reached for the notebook and opened it, not to the formula page I already knew, but further back, near the end. His fingers found a line I hadn't read closely before, tucked under a sketch of a mimosa branch. Read it, he said. The structure is mine alone. Thank you, Laurent, for teaching me to hear it. I read it twice.
Laurent took the technique, Gérald said.
How to weigh a tincture, how to read a burette, how to trust her own nose when every other perfumer in Grasse told her women didn't build structures. They only wore them. He was her teacher. He was never her co-author. Whatever he told you on that phone, he was talking about instruction, not authorship. I think he's carried guilt so long he's confused the two. Something in my chest loosened, just slightly, like a held breath let out through the teeth. Then a new question opened, sharper than the last. If Laurent believed he'd co-written it, would he say so on that stage tonight, in front of Marcus Hale and every camera in the room, and undo the very thing I was about to build? I need to call him before 6, I said, already reaching for my phone. There's no signal down here. Gerald closed the notebook and held it out to me with both hands, like something ceremonial.
Take it.
Take the original. Whatever happens tonight, it doesn't go back in a box. I took it. The cover was heavier than I remembered, warped slightly from years of damp concrete, but it was hers. I pressed my palm flat against it the way I used to when I was 9, testing whether ink could still be felt through leather. Are you coming tonight? I asked. He was quiet long enough that I thought he wouldn't answer. He stood, wiped his palms on his trousers, walked to the workbench, and came back holding something small. I'm not promising you the stage, he said. I don't know if I have the nerve for that yet. Vivian has 30 years of me choosing the easy hallway out of every room. I can't undo that in one night. He took my hand at the garage door, his grip harder than I expected from a man who spent a decade avoiding my eyes at dinner. I couldn't save your mother, he said, but tonight I won't look away again. Then he opened his other hand. A small glass vial sat in his palm, the wax seal unbroken, the paper label gone soft and yellow at the edges, but the handwriting still legible. Eloise Ashby. Original. Do not open. The Flagship's foyer smelled like warm champagne and cold marble, and under both, faint and specific, the ghost of vetiver from the sample bar Delphine had built for me downstairs. I stood at the edge of the stage curtain with a spray card in my pocket, folded twice, and Gerald's small brown key against my hip like a coin I kept turning. 300 chairs. Every one full. Marcus Hale sat front row center, legs crossed, a glass of something pale untouched at his elbow, his eyes moving over the room the way they moved over a contract, line by line, looking for the clause someone hoped he'd skip. 2 rows back, Delphine sat with her clipboard closed on her lap, not looking at it once. Gerald was near the exit, half turned toward the door, a man who had spent his whole life keeping one foot pointed at the way out. Somewhere behind the black curtain to my right, through the door Gerald's key had opened 40 minutes ago, Laurent Vasseur was sitting in the dark with a case of 3 sealed vials on his lap, waiting for a cue he and I had agreed on without saying it twice. Vivian came out under a wash of gold light in a column dress the color of the perfume itself, and the applause went up like something rehearsed. 10 years ago, she said into the microphone, voice smooth as poured wax, I took a small family shop and I gave it a name people could trust. Tonight, we give that name a home. The crowd clapped again. I watched her scan the room once. Quick, checking corners the way a woman checks a stove she thinks she left on. She didn't find what she was looking for. She thought she'd already put it out. And I want to bring up someone, she said, who's been with us since the beginning. She found me at the curtain and crooked 2 fingers, a gesture she'd have used on a waiter. Corinne, come say hello. I walked out into the light. The floor was cold through my shoes, a hard, glassy cold that traveled up into my knees. "This is Corinne," Vivian told the room, one hand light on my shoulder, "my husband's daughter. She's worked in our back workshop for years." A small laugh built somewhere near the back, the kind that starts before the joke lands because people already know Vivian's jokes. The shop girl who smells like other people's success. She said it warmly, like an endearment, which was worse. Never contributed a single drop, this one. But loyal. We love her for it. The laugh came full then, easy and unkind, 300 mouths finding the same shape at once. I let it finish. I did not reach for the microphone. She was still holding an inch from my hands. I found Delphine's face in the crowd, and she was not laughing. Her jaw was set the way it had been in the back office 3 days ago, reading the invoices with her mother's forged signature on them. "That's fair," I said, when the room quieted, and my voice came out steadier than I expected, steady the way a scale is steady before you put anything on it. "I haven't had a chance to say much tonight. I'd like to now. Not about me." Vivian's smile held. Her grip on the microphone did not loosen. "I think we should honor whoever actually made Vivian #1, I said. "Properly. Tonight, in front of everyone who's about to build their trust on it." I turned to the room instead of her. A blind test. 3 unmarked strips. Whoever can name the notes in her own signature, Scent gets to keep telling this story her way. I'll go first if she'd rather. Or she can. The room did the thing rooms do when they sense a shift before they understand it. Not quite silence, but every private conversation folding shut at once. Marcus Hale uncrossed his legs and set his untouched glass down on the floor beside his shoe, both hands now free, both eyes on Vivian. "A parlor trick," Vivian said, laughing to the room, not to me. "On opening night. Then it costs you nothing to win it," I said. I heard, faintly from behind the curtain to my right, the small particular sound of a case latch opening, Lauron on cue, 20 feet away in the dark, close enough that if this went the way I'd built it to go, he would only need to take 3 steps into the light. Nobody in that room knew he was there. I did not look toward the sound. I kept my eyes on Vivian's face and watched something move behind it, quick as a fish under ice. Not embarrassment. Calculation. She was doing what she always did, weighing a room's opinion of her against her own certainty, and for the first time in 10 years, I watched her realize those two things might not agree with each other tonight. "Fine," she said, too brightly, into 300 waiting faces.
Fine.
"Let's play." A stagehand I didn't recognize came out with a tray, 3 glass strips already prepared, standing upright in a block of pale wood, and beside them, folded neat as a napkin, a strip of black silk. I hadn't asked for the blindfold. Someone, Delphine, maybe, working the wings, had gotten ahead of me. 300 phones had already come up, small blue lights blinking, and I understood, watching them, that whatever happened in the next 2 minutes would not stay in this room. I picked up the silk myself and held it out to Vivian across the small distance between us, the fabric catching the gold stage light along one fold. "You go first," I said. "Just call the name of 3 notes in the perfume that carries your name." The room had gone fully still now, 300 people leaning half an inch forward in 300 chairs, Marcus Hale's abandoned glass forgotten on the floor by his shoe. Vivian took the blindfold from my hand. Her fingers, closing around the silk, were not steady. The silk went dark over her eyes, and the room went quiet enough that I could hear the air conditioning cycle on. 3 strips, I said, and set them in her open palm one at a time, waiting a beat between each. She lifted the first, turned it under her nose the way she always did in interviews, chin tilted, performing for cameras that weren't rolling yet.
"Bergamot," she said.
"Something green. Maybe a figue."
"Wrong."
There was no fig anywhere in that bottle. I said nothing. Second strip. She held it too close, inhaled too hard, the kind of mistake my mother used to correct in me when I was 9 years old, standing on a kitchen stool with my eyes taped shut. "Floral," Vivian said. "Rose, I think. Peony." It was iris, not rose, not peony. The whole room could see her guessing, 300 people who'd paid $400 a plate to watch a woman they believed built an empire out of her own nose. Third strip. She held it a long moment, and for the first time her hand trembled enough that the paper strip shook visibly under the stage lights. "Musk," she said finally. A bass note. Something warm. There was no bass note in that strip at all. I'd handed her top notes 3 times over, and she hadn't caught it once. "That's enough," she said, and pulled the blindfold off herself, not waiting for me to untie it. Her hair caught in the knot, and she yanked it free anyway. "This is a stunt," she said into the microphone. Too loud, the kind of loud that comes from fear rather than anger, though I understood by then those two things wore the same face on her. "This is a cheap parlor trick, and I won't be made a fool of at my own launch." "Then let me try," I said. I didn't wait for permission. I took the blindfold from her hands. She let go of it like it had gone hot, and I tied it myself, the same knot my mother used to tie, tight at the temple. No light through the seams. "Same 3, I said. "Give them to me in any order. I won't ask which is which." Someone in the audience laughed, not unkindly, the laugh of a person who thinks they're about to watch something fail. I heard Marcus Hale's chair creak as he leaned forward. The first strip came into my hand. I didn't need 3 seconds. "Bergamot," I said. "Calabria, not Sicily. You can tell by how fast it turns bitter, maybe 40 seconds in, when the Sicilian would hold sweet longer." I heard someone murmur. "Second one's iris. Powdery, orris root, aged at least 2 years before it went into any blend, or it wouldn't sit this soft." I held out my hand for the third, without being asked. "And this is vetiver. Java vetiver, smoked, which is the note that's supposed to anchor the whole composition and which does not appear anywhere in the registration filing for this fragrance." I pulled the blindfold off myself. "I can build it for you," I said, and I walked to the fragrance organ they'd wheeled on stage as a photo prop, never meant to be touched, its little glass bottles lined up like a joke about authenticity nobody thought would be tested. I picked up bergamot, iris, the vetiver, a drop of amber, a breath of musk, in an order my hands knew before my mind finished thinking it, because I had done this exact motion at a workbench in the back of that shop for 10 years while she stood on stages accepting credit for my wrists. I held the strip out to the front row. Marcus Hale rose from his seat without being asked and took it himself.
He smelled it once.
Then again longer. "That's it," he said, not to me, to the room. "That's the fragrance." The gasp that went through the audience wasn't loud. It was the kind of sound 300 people make when they realize, all at once, they might have been lied to. "There's someone I'd like to introduce," I said, and I looked toward the wings, where Gerald had let a man through the service door 20 minutes earlier, a man in a gray wool coat despite the July heat, standing very still in the dark like he'd been standing in dark rooms his whole life, waiting for someone to ask him to step into the light. "Laurent Vasseur," I said. "Please." He walked slowly, the cane in his right hand, but his back was straight, and when he reached the microphone, he did not look at me. He looked at Vivian. "I taught Eloise Ashby everything she knew about technique," he said, his accent thickening the words at the edges. "Structure. Distillation. How to hold a strip, so you don't burn your own nose on day one." A small, dry sound, almost a laugh. But this composition was hers. Every note. I did not write one line of it, and I have never claimed to. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small glass vial, sealed, yellowed with age, a strip of tape across the cap with handwriting on it I would have known blind, in a dark room, underwater. This was hers. Signed the day she finished it. I have carried it for 10 years because I did not have the courage to bring it into a room like this one. He set it on the podium. The woman standing there, he tipped his head toward me, still not looking at Vivian, did not steal anything tonight. She gave it back its name. Phones were up across the room, screens glowing, reporters no longer pretending to write in notebooks. "Where did you find him?" Delphine whispered to no one, though I heard it through the microphone feedback, her hand already moving toward the folder on the table like she wanted to hide it before her mother could reach for it again. Vivian's face had gone the color of the tablecloths. "She's fabricating all of it. she said into a microphone someone hadn't taken from her yet, her voice climbing, cracking at the top. That book, that so-called notebook of hers, it's a fraud. I have the original registration files right here, notarized, dated, everything in order. She snapped her fingers and Delphine, ashen, handed her a folder with trembling hands. Vivian pulled out a stack of photocopied pages and held them over her head like a flag. This is the proof. This is what's real. Mother. Delphine's voice was low, meant only for her, but the stage mics caught it anyway. Those pages have my signature on the compliance line. If that's a forgery, it's not just yours anymore. Vivian didn't look at her. I smiled and reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I drew out the notebook. The real one. Cracked leather, my mother's handwriting bleeding faintly through decades-old ink, the corner of the cover still bent from where a 9-year-old had carried it under her arm like something sacred. I held the notebook with both hands and turned to the LED wall. Delphine. I didn't look at her. The code. She typed it into her phone without a word. The screen behind me went black, then bright. A blank canvas 8 feet tall in front of 300 faces. I set the notebook flat under the document camera clipped to the podium, the one meant for demonstrating fragrance chemistry, and my mother's handwriting filled the wall. The room read it before I said anything. That's the thing about handwriting, no one can argue with a date. This page, I said, is dated April the 11th. I let the number sit. I was 9 years old. My mother wrote out the full accord for what would become Vivian number 1, top, heart, base, in that order, in her own hand, 23 years ago. I flipped to the last line of the page and read it aloud because some things need to be heard, not just seen. This formula is mine alone. Thank you, Laurent, for teaching me to listen. Somewhere behind me I heard Laurent make a small sound, not quite a word. I glanced back once. His hand had gone to his chest, flat against his coat, like he was checking that his heart was still doing its job. I brought up the second image, the registration filing, the one that had never needed a lawsuit, only a woman with a notebook and 18 hours. Delphine's signature sat at the bottom, small and slanted, exactly where I'd first found it 2 nights ago in my apartment with a lamp still on at 2 a.m. Filed 4 years after this page was written, I said. By someone who left out an entire layer of the fragrance. I traced the base notes on the projected formula with my finger, then traced the filing beside it, the gap where vetiver should have been sitting like a hole in a sentence. Vetiver Java, I said. Amber. Musk.
Gone. Not simplified, missing.
You can't drop a foundation and call the house the same house. Someone in the crowd said, not quietly, Jesus. Marcus Hale stood up. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The room had already gone the particular kind of silent that swallows sound instead of making it. He buttoned his jacket, an old habit I'd noticed at the walkthrough, the kind of gesture men make when they're about to say something they've rehearsed twice in a car. I've put 400 stores behind this brand, he said, on the word that this scent was hers. He nodded at Vivian without looking at her. I don't extend contracts to houses built on someone else's work. Effective tonight, Hale Distribution is withdrawing from all agreements with Vivian Ashby. The sound that moved through the room after that wasn't gasping. It was worse, the low mechanical hum of 200 people checking their phones at once, distributors from 3 other houses already texting each other, already leaving. Vivian turned to the crowd, and for the first time all night, she was speaking without a microphone in her hand. This is a family disagreement, she said. This is not. This doesn't concern. It concerns everyone who bought a bottle believing your name was the truth on the label, I said. A reporter near the front. I recognized her from the walkthrough, the one who'd asked about inspiration at 11 that morning and gotten nothing, had her recorder raised toward Delphine now, not me. Ms. Ashby, did you sign that registration? Delphine's face did something I hadn't seen it do in 10 years of watching her hand me clipboards. She stepped forward instead of back. Yes, she said. Her voice cracked on the word, and she let it. My mother told me it was a formality, a renewal. I didn't read past the signature line. She looked at Vivian, and whatever had tied them together for 29 years seemed to come loose right there under the lights. I found out 2 days ago what I actually signed. Vivian's mouth opened. Nothing useful came out of it. That was the loop closing, the one I'd carried since the garage, since Gerald's hands shook opening the toolbox around a single sealed vial. I'd wondered what it would look like when Delphine finally said it in front of people instead of in a hallway to me alone. It looked like relief. It looked like a woman putting down something heavy. Cameras swung between the two of them like something on a track. A man from one of the trade papers was already dictating into his phone. Scandal, forged filing, largest perfume house misattribution in a decade. The words carrying just far enough for me to hear them land. I didn't smile. I didn't have it in me, and even if I had, this wasn't a moment that wanted one. I closed the notebook. The sound of the leather cover meeting itself was small, almost nothing, but it carried in that silence the way a door does when everyone in the house is listening for it. She built an empire on a smell she never understood. I said, to the room, not to her. You can wear someone's name. You can't wear their nose. Vivian was still talking, to Marcus, to the reporters, to no one. Her voice climbing toward the register I'd heard once before, backstage, 10 years ago, the night she told me girls who worked in back rooms didn't get their names on bottles. And then the room shifted again, all at once, 300 heads turning the same direction like something had pulled a string through them. Gerald was walking toward the stage. He came up the side step slowly, one hand on the rail, his face gray in the stage light, the face of a man who had spent 18 hours deciding something. He crossed the platform until he was standing next to me, in front of the cameras, in front of the 300 people who had each paid $400 to be here tonight, and he turned his back to his wife of 22 years. No one moved. No one said anything. For 10 years, I had watched my father choose silence the way other men choose a code in the morning, without thinking, because it was already hanging by the door. He wasn't reaching for silence now. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, shoulder to shoulder with me, while 300 phones kept recording, and I felt the heat of him beside me like a stove finally lit after years of standing cold in the corner of a kitchen. Marcus Hale was already on his phone near the exit, talking low, the words full withdrawal, and in writing by morning, carrying over the noise. Vivian turned in a slow circle, looking for someone to blame, and found only cameras. By Monday, the Flagship's doors were chained, a printed notice taped to the glass, closed for renovation. Nobody believed it. The perfume trade papers didn't bother with euphemism. One headline, syndicated across 4 industry outlets by Wednesday, read, "The biggest forgery in fragrance." Another ran a photo of Vivian mid-scream on the stage, her mouth open, the blindfold still dangling from one hand. I read them standing in my father's garage, the same garage where he'd handed me the notebook 18 hours before the launch. He was there again, sorting through a shoebox of receipts with the particular grimness of a man doing math he already knows the answer to. "The Geneva people called this morning," he said, not looking up. "Vivian's. How much?" "Enough that the house goes." He set down a stack of paper. The Flagship lease was $600,000 a year. She signed it, thinking the launch would cover it 3 times over. Now there's the inventory, too. And what's left of the distribution contracts, which is nothing, since Marcus pulled his signature off everything by Friday. I didn't feel triumphant hearing it. I felt the way you feel watching a wave finish a job the tide started years ago. Inevitable, a little sad, entirely earned. Delphine called me 9 days after the launch. Not before. I noted that. "I'm not calling to apologize for her," she said. Her voice had none of the polish it carried on launch night. "I'm calling because the trade lawyers want a statement about the registration signature, and I'm giving one. My name, not hers. I signed it. I should have looked at what I was signing." "Okay," I said. "That's it? Okay. I'm not going to pretend we're fine, Delphine. But I know the difference between a woman who forged something and a woman who was handed something forged and told to sign it fast." I paused. "I'm not your enemy. I'm also not going to forget standing at that sample counter for 6 years while you got the marketing title." She was quiet for a moment. "That's fair," she said finally, and hung up before either of us had to find a warmer way to end it. We didn't become close. We became two women who no longer needed to lie to each other, which was its own kind of peace, thin but real. I signed the lease on a narrow storefront on Rue Castle 3 weeks later, for 100 square feet, a single north-facing window, rent I could actually afford without anyone's name attached to mine. Laurent came the day I hung the sign, hand-painted, gold on cream, the way I remembered my mother's handwriting looking on the old shop ledger.
Maison Éloise.
He stood on the sidewalk a long time before he came in, one hand pressed flat against the glass like he was checking it was real. She would have wanted the door a different green, he said, which was as close as Laurent ever came to saying he was proud. He agreed to come in twice a week, officially honorary advisor, which meant he sat in the back room correcting my accord ratios and telling stories about Eloise I hadn't heard in 20 years, how she used to make him identify rain on hot pavement versus rain on cold stone, blindfolded, until he got it right 3 times running. My father started coming on Thursdays. The first time, he set down a notebook of his own next to a row of blotter strips and just looked at them, like a man staring at an instrument he'd never learned to play. "Start with this one," I said, handing him a strip. "Tell me what it is before I tell you." He held it under his nose too long, frowning. "Something green."
Bitter.
"Vetiver." "Vetiver," he repeated, writing it down carefully, like he was afraid of getting the spelling wrong in front of me. "Bergamot." "Iris." "Musk." Week by week the list grew, names he wrote down like vocabulary, like penance, like both. "I should have known these 10 years ago," he said once, not looking up from the strip in his hand. "You know them now," I said, and left it there, because some debts you don't get to settle in one sitting, and I've stopped expecting anyone to. I still have my mother's notebook. It sits in the safe here, the real one this time, no copy sitting where the original should be. Some evenings I open it just to see her handwriting, the ink faded to the color of weak tea, the margin note about Calabrian bergamot still there in her own hand. Bergamot, Calabra Sulmant. I didn't need to burn Vivian's house down. I only had to stop lending her my nose.